This is our 3-year-old rescue dog named Max. We got him last year and quickly became bestest of friends. Max is a really good boy. His only problem is he has an addiction for garbage.
Max! Max! Max!
As Max's adopted father, it's my job to make sure we help him save him from himself. So today we're going to build tip-out garbage cans to keep Max out of the trash. To do that, we need to start with a full sheet of plywood. I know you're wondering how I got this full sheet of plywood home, seeing as that I own a car meant for small children to drive. Obviously, you haven't seen that video, so click the link above and I'll show you how that happened. Breaking down the plywood in my driveway is a much easier job on this insulation foam than it would be attempting to wrestle this stuff onto my table saw in the basement. If you own a toddler-sized miter gauge like I do, and sometimes have difficulty cutting boards on it, just flip them around. It makes the job go much easier. After the rough cuts in the driveway, the plywood's carried back inside where I can square it up and bring it down to its final dimensions over on the table saw. I somehow lucked out and managed to not buy the most twisted piece of plywood in the store this time. Since we're basically building a plywood garbage can, I decided to forego any sort of fine joinery and build the entire thing out of pocket screws. I always try to mark on the boards where all the pocket holes need to go, except for one board. Maybe you'll find it later. Play the game, Where Did Mike Screw Up This Week? Most channels like to give you a bloopers reel at the end. I prefer to show you my screw-ups in real time. For the top of the garbage can, I chose to go with some actual lumber. I wanted something pretty. Even when I'm building things out of plywood, I like to add a little bit of prettiness to the top. Due to the pandemic going on, all of my normal lumber stores are closed, so I was forced to go to a big box store to buy this hickory. My reward for doing so was paying 3 times the price I normally would for S4S lumber, which means it's supposed to come squared all 4 sides. I'm sure you can tell by the use of my jointer that this was not true. My assembly table is really flat, and because I'm running low on cauls at the moment, I decided to use it as one giant caul and clamp the pieces to the table. Once the boards were dry, I had a knot on the one end I needed to deal with. So using a few more clamps, I stood it up on its end so I could tape off the board and fill it with epoxy. This is not the normal epoxy I would use for this project, but it's all I could find in stock anywhere. So I dyed it black and pushed it into the knot the best I could. Once everything had cured, I ran it through the planer a few times to even everything out. Then just for fun, I mixed up a second batch of epoxy so I could fill all of the holes my planer decided to rip out of this board. In my house, we recycle, so I am basically building 2 separate garbage cans that I'll mount together as one. If your town doesn't offer recycling, or you just don't believe in it for some reason, the plans I have available on my website can be built as a single unit or as a double as you see me assembling here. The only difference in the construction would be the size of the top and the size of the foot plate and the top brace, but that's all listed in detail in the plans. If you're playing along at home and you guessed top brace is where Mike forgot to put the pocket holes, then winner winner, chicken dinner. Somehow I didn't notice it till I had already screwed in the other side. So that's just the way it's going to stay from now. I'm not undoing all that. Getting a clamp to hold these triangles down can be a little tricky, so I find it better just to let the glue tack up a bit. Go get a snack. Did you know that on the package of Pop-Tarts it says to put them in the freezer for a cool snack? Who does that? Exactly 1 Pop-Tart later is the perfect amount of time to let that glue tack up. Then it's back over to the top, to sand off all those accidental mistakes my planer decided to add to the project. A quick trip over to the table saw to trim this top to size, and then we can temporarily install it on top of the boxes. A little glue and a few brad nails, and we can put the trim on the top and bottom and get ready to go build the doors. Setting up a stop block on the chop saw, I knocked out all the pieces. Then, making sure to actually mark all the boards this time, I drilled all the pocket holes. Now, if you passed elementary school math, you should know how to build a square. It's very simple. I'm sorry, what's that? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm being told it's a rectangle. A rectangle. My apologies. After the rectangle is constructed, a little glue and screws will help finish up the doors. I cut up some beadboard off camera and dropped those in to finish off the doors. I could have gone with a solid panel, but I like the look of the beads. To determine the spacing for all of the doors, I decided to play a game of Uno with myself. And lost. Draw 4 it is. Using a straight edge, a pencil, and a self-centering drill bit, I installed both hinges for the first door. Then I copied those measurements to install the hinges on the second door. Finally, I marked out the locations for the door pulls and screwed them on. Now to give this hickory top some style. I grabbed my trim router and put a chamfer around all the edges. Man, do I love a good chamfer. Is chamferholics a thing? For a finish on the top, I decided to go with a natural color Danish oil. It's a really simple finish to apply, and it really brings out the grain in this hickory. Once I had 2 coats applied, it was time to set it aside to dry. I brought the pieces out to my spray booth to put a coat of paint on. If you follow me on Instagram, you got to watch me try to set this up by myself in the wind. It went exactly as you would expect. For a top coat, I went with a water-based polyurethane that, unlike James Bond, likes to be stirred, not shaken. If you've never used a water-based polyurethane before, don't freak out when it looks horrible while you're putting it on. All your brush strokes will disappear and your finish will look perfectly smooth by the time that it's dry. An oil-based poly would give this a yellow tint when it's done, and that's just not the look we're going for. After the hinges and door pulls are reinstalled, the last step is to screw in some eye hooks into the doors and sides to attach a chain. This is to prevent the garbage can from hitting the ground when your children forget how to use doors. And that is about that. Now try not to be jealous of my grandma-style 100-year-old wallpaper. We haven't gotten around to remodeling the kitchen yet. This tip-out garbage can holder looks great, and it has ruined Max's addiction. I'm sure he's ecstatic about it. If you'd like plans to build a single or a double tip-out garbage can holder, I have detailed plans available on my website. If you think I did a good job, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. I've got more projects in the works, so I'll see you next time.